I'd like to take a moment to share with you a solid conversation that I had with a new client. And I hope that what I shared with him is a help to you the way it was to him. He is 34 years old. He has no children. He is in an off and on relationship, he says, with a 32-year-old woman for the last 2 years. He came to me and said, Doc, I'm coming to you because I've been through a lot in past relationships and I've worked hard to correct my attachment style. I said, what are you now? He said, I'm secure now. I really believe that I'm secure. But because of this off and on relationship that I have, I'm starting to even question my work. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, for starters, I believe her attachment style is that she's avoidant, but I'm not sure. I said, well, why aren't you sure? He said, because, I'm versed on being avoided because I've been avoided, and maybe we'll get into that later. But I've worked from being avoidant to secure. But the reason why I'm just not secure is because, if I'm being honest, her behavior is just really causing me to question everything about the work that I've done on myself. I said, well, it's not odd that when you are connected to someone who is avoidant, or maybe even perhaps anxious, for you to get to a space where you begin to question everything that you've done on yourself, because their behavior will cause you to question your own work. And it can also cause you to question your own worth and your own value and the effort that you put into yourself. I said, so that's not uncommon. I said, but let's just get a little bit more specific. And I said, we can make this really simple. I want to give you 2 questions that I want you to answer, and this will give us an idea of what she is. I said, number 1, describe to me the consistency of her effort. He started laughing. He said, well, it's like when she cares, she shows it. And when she doesn't care, she doesn't. She pretty much acts as if she can't multitask when it comes to us and effort. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, he said, she's got a great career. She manages several people in an department that she runs for an organization where she's working. And she works a lot of hours. And I believe she does work. We communicate inconsistently throughout the day, most days. But she is a very busy woman. But she juggles that stuff easily. I said, so then what's the problem on your end? He said, well, when it comes to me and finding time to engage with me, she's very hit or miss. She can be very nice at times, and at other times she can act as if she just completely doesn't care and she's completely disconnected, or maybe even not interested. I said, hot and cold? He said, that's a good way to put it. I said, okay. I said, well, consider the second question. What is her response and approach to conflict? He leaned his head back. He started to shake his head and smile and said, well, she has no problem initially addressing anything, especially if she believes she's right. She will address it. She'll get to it. She'll say something about it if she's right. But if she's wrong, she will go silent. I said, what does that mean? He said she'll go sometimes days, not even speak to him, text him, reach out to him. We live about an hour apart. Distance hasn't been an issue. We tend to see each other sometimes during the week if we can fit it into our schedule, but on most weekends. But she'll go days. You can tell that she's maybe upset or offended because she gets really cold and silent when it comes to disagreements that we have where, frankly, she's wrong. I said, does this silence also include not communicating? He said, yes, it includes that. She text messages, phone calls, will literally leave my messages on read and not respond, all of those things. And it really bothers me, Doc. And at this point, I was shocked. You should never judge a book by its cover. A bigger guy, but he started to get a little emotional and teary-eyed. And I asked him, I said, why are you getting upset? He said, well, if I'm being honest, she tried to accuse me of being nonchalant. I said, how's that? He said, because I refused to engage in that kind of behavior. That when she starts to act that way, when it came to her effort and when it came to her response to conflict, which were the questions you asked, Doc, when she acted that way, I would ask a couple of times what's wrong or maybe even fuss about it here or there. But then I started to just withdraw myself because in my mind, I didn't think as a man that it was appropriate for me to be able to continue to try to engage with someone who didn't want to engage with me the right way. I said, sir, man or woman, it doesn't matter where you are or who you are, that is not appropriate. And the thing about attachment styles that I think everybody needs to get comfortable with is that every attachment style doesn't belong to a particular gender. Men can be avoidance. Women can absolutely be avoidance. Men can be anxious. Women can absolutely be anxious. Men can be secure. And women can absolutely be secure. I said, so I get what you're saying, but help me understand the emotion behind why her accusing you of being nonchalant is so sensitive. He said, because Doc, there were times where she would come back to her senses after, in essence, just disappearing for days because she didn't want to engage in the conflict. I saw that as running. And she would come back to her senses, send me shallow text messages, send me a meme or something like that, not really address the issue. And if she did apologize, it was very half-hearted. I said, what do you mean by half-hearted? He said, which is very vague, sorry, or I love you, stuff like that. And he said, I didn't appreciate that as a solid communicator. And that's what I've grown to be. And he said, Doc, this is the crazy part. What also makes me emotional about this is that I used to be avoidant. I said, who, you? He said, yes, sir. I said, when? How? He said, with my ex. The lady that he dated before her, he stated, was very secure. And he showed up in that relationship very avoidant. So when they had problems, he would run. His communication was poor. He would shy away from addressing it. And she didn't put up with it. And he lost a great woman. And it made him realize he really needed to do some work on himself. I said, sir, that's powerful. Not only is it powerful, but it really speaks to the fact that if you really do this work, it'll work for you. He said to me that she, as in his present girlfriend, will pursue him heavily when it comes to matters according to her or that are important to her. And it will cause her sometimes to come across as very loving. He said she's a nice lady. You know, she's a good person. She can come across as extremely strong in how she loves me when she's on. I said, but when it comes to dealing with things that are hard, she absolutely goes the other direction. I said, well, this feeling that you feel from her is nothing more than her positioning herself to use affection as a way of not addressing issues. I said, to put this simply, we can call it deflection. And one of the things that we know about avoidance is that avoidants are masters of deflection. Instead of them addressing an issue, they will deflect it. And it is a mechanism that causes them to ignore the things that they need to take responsibility and accountability for. He said, that makes absolute sense. I said to him, I said, sir, and when they don't do this, even if they're great lovers or they seem to really be loving you in a heavy way, when they're on, they still appear to be very selfish and self-centered. He said, Doc, I've accused her of being that. And then she's flipped it on me because I've wanted to address things. And that's what has me in front of you. It's caused me to question everything that I've done on for myself in terms of the work that I've done on myself. Because when she says those things, it makes me pause and say, well, maybe something is wrong with me. Maybe I am the problem. She's trying to love me, but I keep pointing out things. I said, sir, the love that she's showing you on her terms is just a fancy way of describing this term called love bombing. It feels great when she's on, she's on. It's hot and heavy. You just feel like you're on top of the world, but it's only on her terms. It's only when she wants to do it. That's love bombing. And love bombing is more than just people pouring it on heavy. Love bombing also deals with people selectively choosing to love you. Does that make sense at all? He said, Doc, that is crystal clear. I said, your girlfriend is not avoidant, and your girlfriend isn't anxious. She's anxious avoidant. And I said, the reason we know this is because she possesses both styles. She can be very off on. She can be very hot, cold. She can be very in, out, very present, very absent. And we know this through her responses to effort and her responses to communication. I said, sir, where are you from? He said, I'm from the country. I'm a Mississippi boy. I said, you mind if I use that? He said, no problem. He said, I'm a Mississippi boy. I said, well, I'm from the country too, small town. And when I grew up, we had something on our doors called screen doors. Those little netted things. He said, I know exactly what you're talking about. He said, my grandfather had a farm. I said, perfect. My grandfather had multiple farms. And we had something called a screen door that was that little netted thing. I don't even know if they sell them anymore. He said, they do, Doc. He said, you haven't been to the country in a while. I said, I haven't. I said, yeah, they sell those little netted things that you can see through. But those netted things were designed to do what? He said, to allow you to get fresh air, but to keep insects out. I said, in the country, what's the main insect that flies into your house? He said, flies. I said, perfect. Where are flies most comfortable? He said, it depends on a number of things. I said, like what? He said, it typically depends on where there's food, where there might be safety, where there might be some comfort. And then he stops, takes his glasses off, and begins to rub his eyes. I'm just smiling at him. You see tears coming down his face. I said, flies are very comfortable where there's food, where they're receiving something. Flies are very comfortable where they are comfortable, where they choose to be comfortable. Flies are very comfortable where there's safety. Flies are very comfortable where there's shelter. That can be inside your house where there's food. That could be at a cookout where you can't even eat a hot dog because you're swatting at what? He said, flies. I said, but sir, I grew up with a mom and daddy that used to tell us when you came in the house to do what behind you? He said, shut the door. I said, why? He said, because sir, if you leave the screen door open or the door open, you're going to let flies in. I said, sir, because she's anxious avoidant, she's comfortable wherever there's food, comfort, shelter, and safety. And it seems like she's more on the avoidant side than she is on the anxious side, which means she likes to be outside more than where? He said, inside. I said, sir, I have a recommendation. Maybe you should consider shutting the door. Because if you consider shutting the door, it challenges her to do to you what you had to do when your ex showed up. How? He said, secure. I said, sir, I don't think there's anything wrong with the work that you've done. Just because you're securely attached doesn't mean you are unaware. It doesn't mean you can't feel, and it doesn't mean you don't care. And it also doesn't mean that you're not going to just lay back and allow things to be. Bringing up a matter doesn't mean you're complaining about it. You're bringing attention to what needs to be addressed. And he said, Doc, this was a call that has completely changed my life. He did a great job. We've worked together several sessions, and his girlfriend is asked to do a session with us together because she wants to do the work. And I'm absolutely rooting on them that they can figure this out. I hope this made sense. If it did, type church in the comments with 3 R's. And then remember, you've got 2 jobs. 1, be better today than what you were yesterday. And 2, don't forget what I told you. What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Zeb. Listen, I've been dying to make this announcement for a very long time now, and I'm pleased to say that Inspire Nation has officially launched. Yes, we finally got a Facebook and YouTube community group where we're going to have exclusive content, exclusive shorts, exclusive discussion prompts, where we're going to engage with other people literally around the world who are on the same healing journey that we're on. I need you to go find these pages right now on Facebook and YouTube. Inspire Nation, follow the page, join the group, introduce yourself, and be prepared to link up with literally thousands of people around the world who are on the same healing journey, who are looking for the same resources, and who want to also be surrounded with other like-minded individuals who are growing in the same direction as you are. I'm so excited about this because it's the beginning of some great things I can't talk about right now. Listen, you got 2 jobs. 1, be better today than what you were yesterday. And 2, don't forget what I told you.